Welcome to another special bonus episode of Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints as we continue our Why Christianity is True series. And this week, we are going to do something bold. We are going to crunch the numbers, big time. Because in this episode, we're looking at one of the most astonishing clues built into the fabric of reality itself. The fact that mathematics works. And not just in some loose poetic sense. Mathematics works with a level of precision, reliability, and predictive power that borders on the miraculous. It describes the motions of planets centuries before we observe them. It predicts the existence of particles before we build machines capable of detecting them. It governs the behavior of light, gravity, atoms, galaxies, everything. Physicist Eugene Wigner called this the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. But today we're going to show you that its effectiveness is not unreasonable at all. It's not an accident. It's not a fluke. It is evidence. Evidence that the universe is not a chaotic accident, but a coherent creation. Evidence that the laws of nature are not random, but rational. Evidence that behind the equations, behind the constants, behind the elegant structure of reality, behind all those numbers crunching away, there is a mind. John Lennox, Stephen Meyer, Pascal, Kepler, Newton, Gödel, these thinkers all saw the same thing. The universe is written in mathematics, and mathematics is the language of a lawgiver. So today we're going to follow the numbers wherever they lead. And if we're honest, if we let the evidence speak, those numbers point unmistakably toward God. And so, to kick today off right, I'm going to show a little video from one of the best apologists out there, William Lane Craig. As a side note, you should definitely check his website out, Reasonable Faith. It is chock full of good information on this and many other topics. So, I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you after the video.
Why does mathematics work? Think about it. Mathematical entities like numbers, sets, and equations are non-physical and abstract. They can't cause anything. Yet, for some reason, the physical universe operates mathematically. As Galileo put it, the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. Scientists do not use mathematics merely as a convenient way of organizing the data. They believe that mathematical relationships reflect real aspects of the physical world. Science relies on the assumption that we live in an ordered universe that is subject to precise mathematical laws. Thus, the laws of physics are all expressed as mathematical equations. For example, Pythagoras discovered that when a vibrating string is shortened by half, it plays the same note one octave higher. Isaac Newton's observations led to his discovery of the law of gravity, a mathematical relationship expressed as a simple equation that enabled us to enter the space age. Mathematics enabled astronomers to pinpoint the location of a previously undiscovered planet. And James Clerk Maxwell used mathematics to predict the existence of radio waves. Albert Einstein, working with theoretical mathematics developed 50 years earlier, formulated his general theory of relativity, a pillar of modern physics. His calculations were later confirmed during a solar eclipse, when Arthur Eddington observed light from distant stars bending around the sun. Then, Peter Higgs used mathematical equations to predict the existence of an elementary particle. It took 48 years, billions of dollars, and millions of man-hours for experimental scientists to finally detect the Higgs boson. How do we explain the astonishing applicability of math to the physical world? In 1960, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist and mathematician Eugene Wigner published an article that stunned the scientific community entitled "The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences." Wigner concluded that the effectiveness of mathematics is a miracle, which we neither understand nor deserve. Why is mathematics so effective? Philosophers who address this question fall into two camps. Naturalists, who believe that all that exists concretely is space-time and its physical contents. They exclude supernatural causes. And theists, who believe in a God who created the universe. Naturalists cannot provide a reasonable explanation for why mathematics applies to the physical world. It's just a happy coincidence. But this is no explanation at all. At most, naturalists can say that it's not surprising that math applies to the world, because the world itself just happens to have a mathematical structure, so of course mathematics applies to it. But this explanation is unsatisfactory for two reasons. First, a great deal of mathematics in science cannot be physically realized. For example, imaginary numbers and infinite dimensional spaces. Although these concepts are useful, physical reality cannot possibly have the structure they describe. And second, this answer still doesn't explain why the physical universe has such a stunningly elegant mathematical structure. By contrast, for theists, mathematics works so well in the physical world because God has chosen to create the world according to the plan he had in mind. The first-century Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria offered this analogy. When a king wants to build a city, a trained architect first designs in his mind a plan of all the parts of the city that are to be completed. Then he begins to construct the city out of stones and timber, looking at the model and ensuring that the material objects are built according to the plan. Mathematics and physics work so well together because the same mind that designed the universe on a mathematical model also built the universe on the same mathematical model. All of this adds up to an argument for the existence of God that goes like this. If God does not exist, the applicability of mathematics is just a happy coincidence. But the applicability of mathematics is not just a happy coincidence. Therefore, God exists. Eugene Wigner was right. The effectiveness of mathematics in the physical world is quite literally a miracle, which is best explained by the existence of God.
I thought that was a very helpful introduction to this week's topic. And I will stress again, check out the website reasonablefaith.org. They really have a wealth of information out there. But to really think about this topic, you have to consider this. Before there was life, before there were stars, before there was time, there was mathematics. Not invented, discovered, waiting. The universe is not chaos. It's a cosmos, an ordered, intelligible structure governed by mathematical laws so precise they border on the miraculous. Oxford mathematician John Lennox, the man pictured on the left, reminds us that mathematics is the most universal language. It works everywhere. It describes everything. If the universe were truly random, chaotic, and unguided, mathematics wouldn't work, yet it works with astonishing precision. Stephen Meyer, the man pictured on the right, adds this: the intelligibility of nature is not a given, it's a gift. And Lennox states that mathematics is discovered, not invented. And the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics, that's Wigner's term, points beyond naturalism. The universe behaves mathematically because it is ordered. And here's a way to get our heads around this. Imagine standing under a tree. You let go of an apple and it falls straight down. Every time, predictably. That's order, and is described perfectly by Newton's law of gravity. But here's the astonishing part. The universe didn't have to behave this way. In fact, order is not the natural state of things. Chaos is. Left to itself, matter could have scattered randomly. Forces could have fluctuated wildly, and nothing would have been stable enough for stars, planets, or life. Yet, instead of chaos, we find exquisite mathematical harmony. The same equation that governs your falling apple also governs the orbit of the moon, the tides of the ocean, and the motions of galaxies millions of light years away. That's not luck, it's design. Mathematics didn't need to work. There's no logical reason the universe should obey neat formulas rather than random noise. But it does, and it does so everywhere, flawlessly. And that's why thinkers like John Lennox and Stephen Meyer and others say that the effectiveness of mathematics is strong evidence of a mind behind the cosmos, a rational creator who built order into a world that could have been chaos. Mathematical truths are not physical. They are eternal. This idea came from Kurt Gödel, pictured on your screen, who was a brilliant Austrian-American logician and mathematician who revolutionized our understanding of truth and logic in the 20th century. Gödel discovered that mathematical truth exists independently of us. It's out there, not something we make up. He proved that even in a perfectly logical system, like arithmetic, there are true statements that can't be proven within that system. That means truth is bigger than proof. Mathematics isn't just a human invention of symbols and rules. It points to a deeper, objective reality that our minds can glimpse but never fully contain. And if mathematics is eternal, then it existed before the universe. And if it existed before the universe, it cannot be explained by the universe. And a way to visualize his idea is to think of math like a vast landscape. And we build maps, which would be our equations and proofs, to explore this map. Gödel showed that no matter how good our map is, there will always be parts of the landscape that are real but beyond the edges of our map. Those truths exist whether we can or cannot reach them. And there are many everyday examples of this. Prime numbers, for example. There are an infinite number of prime numbers. Now, that's not because we decided that. It's just simply true in the structure of numbers. The new ones have to be discovered. As a side note, the largest known prime number that's been discovered as of mid-2026 is called the Mersenne prime, and it has over 26 million digits. That seems like a big number, and it was discovered using distributed computing. Or geometry, for example. The ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter is always pi. That truth holds everywhere in the universe, whether it's a child's ball, the moon, or the UY Scuti supergiant star, with a radius about 1,700 times the size of our sun, so large that if it was placed at the center of our solar system, its surface would reach beyond Jupiter's orbit. The ratio is the same for all of them. It's always pi. And of course, Newton's formula for gravity works because the universe itself behaves mathematically, not because we forced it to. Gödel's discovery implies that mathematics is not just a mental game. It's a window into something real, eternal, and rational, a realm of truth that exists beyond human minds. And that's why thinkers like John Lennox and Stephen Meyer see Gödel's work as evidence of the mind behind the universe, a divine rationality that makes mathematical order possible. And if you remember the episode we did a few weeks ago on fine-tuning, we showed very conclusively that the universe is balanced on a razor's edge of mathematical precision. For example, you have the cosmological constant, which is fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 120th power. Gravity has been fine-tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 40th power. Electromagnetism and to gravitational force is 10 to the 36th power. So all these things are very finely tuned. Change any one of them, and you get no stars, no chemistry, no life. Meyer argues this is not only improbable, it's mathematically absurd under chance. Again, math is written all over our universe. And humans do not merely observe the mathematical universe, we understand it. Why, if you think about it, should unguided evolution produce creatures capable of grasping abstract mathematics? Lennox says because we are made in the image of a rational God. Meyer says that mind from mind, not mind from matter, causes this phenomenon. And this goes right along with what we discussed a few weeks ago about how reason itself, the fact that we can reason, points to God. It's all connected. Naturalism must explain 3 things: why mathematics exists, why mathematics governs the universe, and why human beings can understand mathematics. And it fails at all 3. The universe cannot explain its own mathematical structure. Laws cannot arise from lawlessness. Mathematics is not a property of matter. It arises from an eternal mind. And the fact that math arises from an eternal mind is a fascinating and deeply philosophical question, one that sits at the intersection of mathematics, metaphysics, and theology. The idea that mathematics is discovered rather than invented implies that mathematical truths exist independently of human minds, timeless, objective, and eternal. Now, theists often interpret this as evidence of a transcendent mind, what we've been talking about, that grounds those truths. But, of course, not everyone agrees here. Atheists and secular philosophers push back in several ways. One way they push back is by adopting mathematical constructivism. And what that is it argues that math is a human creation, a symbolic system that we built to describe patterns in nature. Numbers and equations are tools, not entities that exist out there somewhere. The apparent universality of math arises because the universe behaves consistently, not because math itself is divinely inspired. For example, they say, we invented the concept of pi to describe circles. Circles existed, but pi is our abstraction. Now, there's some big flaws here in this view. One, this view struggles to explain why mathematics works so perfectly in describing the universe, even in places where human intuition never reached until much later. For example, you have the unreasonable effectiveness problem. If math were merely invented, it should map so precisely onto the physical world. Equations developed for pure abstraction, like complex numbers or tensor calculus, later turned out to describe real phenomena, quantum mechanics, relativity, and electromagnetism. This uncanny fit suggests discovery, not invention. And you have the objectivity paradox. Constructivism says that math is subjective, that it's a human creation. Yet mathematical truths are universally valid. 2 plus 2 equals 4 holds everywhere, regardless of culture or species. If math were just a human construct, it should vary like language or arts or politics, but it doesn't. 2 plus 2 equals 4, no matter how just it would be if it equaled 6. And you have the predictive power issue. Mathematical structures often predict realities before their actual observation. An example is, and don't ask me to explain it because it's way over my head, but Dirac's equation predicted the existence of antimatter decades before antimatter was actually discovered. Now, here's a question. How could a human invention foresee something that exists independently of us? Pretty good trick, eh? And you have Gödel's incompleteness challenge. Gödel showed that any formal system contains truth that can't be proven within it. This implies that mathematical truth transcends human construction. It exists beyond our invented frameworks. And then there's the ontological gap problem. Constructivism can't explain where mathematical truths reside. They assume everything is only in the material world. Well, where do mathematical realities live? They certainly aren't under the couch cushion. And if they're not physical and not mental, what kind of existence do they have? Theism answers they exist in the eternal mind of God. Constructivism leaves that question hanging. In short, constructivism explains how we use math, but not why math precedes us, or why it governs reality so flawlessly. Another theory that tries and remove God from the equation is mathematical naturalism. This theory holds that mathematical truths emerge from the structure of the physical universe. Math works because the universe has regularities which can be modeled mathematically. The success of math doesn't require a pre-existing mind, only a lawful cosmos. Now, some atheists say if the universe were chaotic, math wouldn't apply. Its effectiveness reflects the universe order, not divine authorship. A good example of someone who held this view was the late philosopher Hilary Putnam. His picture is on your screen. And he was quoted as saying, "Mathematics is not a mysterious realm of abstract objects, but a human activity embedded in our empirical inquiry." Now, this theory is, and I'm sorry to be blunt here, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but it is complete nonsense. It is one of the most subtle yet self-defeating positions in the philosophy of mathematics. Mathematical naturalism claims that mathematics is fully part of the natural world, that mathematical truths arise from physical processes, human cognition, or evolutionary adaptation. In other words, math is not transcendent or abstract, it's a product of nature itself. But this view runs into some deep philosophical trouble. First, you have the ontological contradiction here. Mathematical entities are non-physical, numbers, sets, and functions that have no mass, charge, or location. If naturalism says only physical things exist, then mathematics should not exist at all. That would mean that math, of course, would belong to that imaginary fantasy world populated by the Tooth Fairy, the Loch Ness Monster, Santa Claus, unicorns, and Bigfoot. Pure myth and not real. And yet naturalists use math to describe the physical world. That's a contradiction. They rely on something their worldview says shouldn't exist. And then you have the epistemic gap. The epistemic gap in mathematical naturalism is one of the most devastating weaknesses it has. It exposes the impossibility of bridging physical processes and abstract truth. What the gap means is this. Mathematical naturalism claims that our knowledge of mathematics arises from natural phenomenon, brain activity, evolution, or sensory experience. But the epistemic gap asks, how can purely physical events in the brain yield awareness of eternal non-physical truths? Neurons fire, chemicals flow, and signals pass. Yet none of these physical events are the truth of 2 + 2 = 4. They merely represent it. The gap between representation and reality, the mind's ability to grasp necessity, and the universality of it, cannot be reduced to matter in motion. And here's why it's a fatal flaw. One, physical systems operate contingently. They could have been otherwise. Mathematical truths, however, are necessary. A naturalistic account can't explain how contingent matter gives rise to necessary knowledge. If math were a product of evolution, for example, it would vary across species or environments. Yet pi and prime numbers are the same everywhere. The universality of math implies access to something transcendent, not merely biological. And naturalism can explain how beliefs form, not why they're true. This epistemic gap shows that the causal relationship explanations of this, neurons firing in your head, don't yield the justification of why we're right about 2 + 2 = 4. And then there's the view from nowhere problem. Mathematical reasoning allows us to step outside the physical world and describe it objectively. But if our minds are fully natural, how can we transcend nature to view it from the outside? The epistemic gap suggests that mathematical knowledge points beyond the physical, towards reason itself as a non-material reality. It's a whisper of transcendence inside cognition, the mind touching something eternal. And to give a humorous example, maybe the neurons in little Johnny's head here just said that 2 + 3 = 23. On what basis do we have to say that his neurons are wrong? Maybe he is just ahead on the evolutionary scale, and 7 × 5 in the future, when we're all caught up with him, will equal 75. You see the problem. And then there's the applicability mystery. Why does math, a supposedly natural byproduct of evolution, describe the cosmos so perfectly? Equations developed for pure thought, like the Riemann geometry. Again, don't ask me to explain it. I don't understand it. It's above my head, but it's a thing. Later turned out to describe space-time. something it had no idea about. Naturalism can explain this unreasonable effectiveness, which looks more like discovery than invention. And here's the thing. If the universe vanished today, 2 plus 2 equals 4 would still be true. That means mathematical truth transcends nature. Naturalism, by definition, denies transcendence, so it collapses under its own logic. Mathematical naturalism tries to keep math inside the physical world, but math itself refuses to stay there. It points beyond matter, toward mind, reason, and ultimately the logos. That's why many philosophers, from Gödel to Plantinga to Lennox, argue that mathematics is strong evidence of a rational source beyond nature. And yet another way that atheists try to explain why math works without invoking God is the evolutionary cognitive argument. Cognitive evolution suggests that our brains evolved to recognize patterns for survival. Mathematical reasoning is an extension of pattern recognition and spatial awareness. The discovery, quote-unquote, feeling comes from uncovering relationships that our mind are already wired to find. And in this view, math is a mental map, not a metaphysical realm. I mean, look, for example, no doubt our early ancestors recognized that some leaves are poisonous and some leaves are nutritious. And no doubt evolution favored those who recognize the patterns of harmful plants over those who don't. I mean, honestly, it's kind of hard to reproduce when you're dead, right? But the main flaw in evolutionary cognitive argument about mathematics is that it misunderstands the nature of mathematical truth and overextends biological reasoning into the realm of abstraction. I mean, here's the core idea. The argument claims that if our cognitive faculties evolved purely for survival, not for truth, then our mathematical beliefs, like all beliefs, are unreliable. But mathematics isn't a survival technique. It's a formal system of necessary relations. Evolutionary processes can explain why we could count or measure, and that was useful for survival, but not why 2 plus 3 equals 5 is always true. And here's where the flaw lies. It's a category error. Evolution operates in the domain of contingent biological adaptation, while mathematics operates in the domain of necessary logical structure. The argument conflates these two categories, assuming that truth about numbers must be biologically derived, when it is conceptually independent of biology. Evolution may shape the mechanisms of cognition, but not the content of mathematical truth. Our brains can access mathematical truths because they instantiate reasoning, not because evolution invented those truths. There is a big self-defeat problem here, too. If evolution makes all cognition unreliable, then the reasoning used to teach that conclusion, including mathematical probability, by the way, collapses. The argument undermines its own logical foundation. And look, even if evolution produced our reasoning faculties, the truths we discover are not contingent on that origin. They are objective truths no matter why we believe them. I mean, the flaw is that the argument treats mathematics as a biological product rather than a rational discovery. Evolution explains how we came to reason, not why reason reveals eternal truths. Mathematical knowledge transcends survival. It's the mind's window into necessity. And I think if you remember from a couple weeks ago, when we had the Alvin Plantinga's tiger example, he needs to make an encore to explain this point. In this example, a man loves tigers, and whenever he sees a tiger, he runs. Running is adaptive. But the beliefs causing the running can be wildly false. He could have adapted to run away from the tiger because he believes that the best way to pet a tiger is to run away from it first. Or he believes that tigers are hallucinations, and his religion says to sprint away when hallucinations appear. Now, these beliefs are completely false, yet they still produce the same adaptive behavior, running away. Evolution selects behavior, not truth. Now, apply this to mathematics. Mathematics is not behavior. It is truth tracking at the highest level. necessity, universality, and abstraction. But evolution doesn't care about truth, only survival. The flaw in evolutionary accounts of mathematical cognition is this: evolution cannot distinguish between true mathematical beliefs and false ones, because both can produce equally adaptive behavior. Running from a tiger doesn't require true beliefs. It just requires that you run away from the tiger. And surviving in the world doesn't require correct arithmetic. I mean, consider the boy who thinks numbers are jealous. And he's asked the question, what is 8 plus 7? And obviously the correct answer is 15. But here's how he comes to 15. He says, well, 8 and 7 are best friends. But 9 is super jealous of them because 9 wants to be friends with 7 too. So 9 tries to steal 7 away, but 8 blocks him. That makes 9 really mad, so he stomps away and goes to hang out with 6 instead. And 6 plus 9 is 15. So obviously 8 plus 7 equals 15. Now, he gets the right answer, but through a chain of logic that would make Euclid burst into flames. Correct behavior, or the correct answer in this case, can arise from wildly false beliefs. Evolution doesn't care why the child got 15. It only cares that he survives long enough to reproduce. And correct arithmetic is not a survival trait. This is why evolution cannot guarantee mathematical truth tracking. The right answer can come from the wrong reasons. Evolution selects for behavior, not truth. Mathematics is truth, not behavior. Therefore, evolution cannot explain mathematical knowledge. If naturalism plus evolution is true, then our mathematical beliefs are the product of blind survival mechanisms, not truth-tracking rationality. But mathematics is truth-tracking rationality. So the tiger example reveals the contradiction. Evolutionary naturalism undermines the reliability of the very cognitive faculties needed to do mathematics. Some atheists, to explain this problem away, have adopted the Platonism without God approach. If you remember reading the allegory of Plato's cave in school, it's that idea. The ideal world of the forms exists, math for example, but we're all trapped in the cave and can only see shadows, not reality in its true form, the world of the forms where math would exist. Some secular philosophers, like Roger Penrose, accept mathematical Platonism, that mathematical objects exist independently, but deny that this requires a divine mind. They argue that the realm of mathematical forms could be eternal and impersonal. The eternal truths exist, but not in consciousness. They simply are. The Christian or theistic response says that eternal intelligible order implies eternal intelligence. If math is discovered, not invented, it must exist in a mind capable of conceiving it. That mind precedes the universe, and hence it's God. As Kepler said, geometry existed before creation. It is co-eternal with the mind of God. And you have to ask this question of a person who would believe in Platonism without God. Why is it easier for you to accept an idealized world of the forms existing in some ethereal plane and not God? Why is that idea more reasonable? That seems to be a long way to travel just to avoid coming to the conclusion that God exists. And one thing that's hovering over this whole debate is the role of scientism and in this debate, and it's absolutely central. Scientism is the belief that everything can be explained by science, including mathematics, by the way. And scientism has put down deep roots in our culture, despite the fact that it is demonstrably false. But it is probably the most dominant worldview belief among our educated class today. And at the core of the scientism argument is the idea that belief in God, or an eternal mind, is just something obviously non-bright people just desperately want to believe. That real truth comes only from science, and material science at that. And scientism says that math is just part of science. And scientism treats mathematics as a natural phenomenon, a product of brain activity, something that evolved, something science can explain the way it explains digestion or photosynthesis. And look, Probably the best response that I could come up with to why this idea is false is in this little video clip I'm going to show next. So I hope you enjoy. It's a classic.
That's taken together with a reason why people believe, desperate to believe, together with the fact that you don't need actually a God, in a sense amounts to an argument against the existence of God.
Well, I guess I don't see that. I mean, why doesn't that commit the genetic fallacy of trying to say that by explaining how a belief originates, you thereby show the belief to be false? Even if it were true that belief in the existence of God were the product of fear and anxiety and so forth, which I don't for a minute admit, but even if it were, that's simply a genetic fallacy to say that because that's the way the belief originates, that therefore the belief is false.
But that's only one half of the argument. I'm not saying that that alone is adequate, and I'm not saying that the fact that science can account for everything it alone is also adequate. But taken together, the fact that science is omnipotent, and the fact that I can understand why people like you desperately want to believe in God. That is an argument against the existence of God.
But two fallacious arguments put together don't make a sound argument, right?
They are, but do you deny that science cannot account for everything?
Yes, I do deny that science
So what can't it account for?
Well, had you brought that up in the debate, I had a number of examples that I was going to give. I think there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but that we're all rational to accept. Let me list 5. Logical and mathematical truths cannot be proven by science. Science presupposes logic and math, so that to try to prove them by science would be arguing in a circle. Metaphysical truths, like there are other minds other than my own, or that the external world is real, or that the past was not created 5 minutes ago with an appearance of age, are rational beliefs that cannot be scientifically proven. Ethical beliefs about statements of value are not accessible by the scientific method. You can't show by science whether the Nazi scientists in the camps did anything evil as opposed to the scientists in Western democracies. Aesthetic judgments, number 4, cannot be accessed by the scientific method because the beautiful, like the good, cannot be scientifically proven. And finally, most remarkably, would be science itself. Science cannot be justified by the scientific method. Science is permeated with unprovable assumptions. For example, in the special theory of relativity, the whole theory hinges on the assumption that the speed of light is constant in a one-way direction between any 2 points A and B. But that strictly cannot be proven. We simply have to assume that in order to hold to the theory.
But you're missing the whole...
So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah.
So we are... none of these beliefs can be scientifically proven, and yet they are accepted by all of us, and we're...
Put that in your pipe and smoke it, indeed. And finally, part of the reason that scientism has taken hold in our world right now is that we all suffer as a culture from a big dose of historical amnesia. Big time. Because the founders of modern science did not see mathematics as a human invention. They saw it as revelation. For most of human history, the world was seen as chaotic, cyclical, or governed by capricious gods. I mean, look, you want to know more about it, just read some Greek mythology sometime for many dark and disturbing examples. I mean, these are not gods you want in charge of your fate. Not at all, trust me. Nature was unpredictable, and the idea of universal discoverable laws simply did not exist. Christianity changed all that. Christianity introduced a radical conviction into the ancient world. The universe is rational because it was created by a rational God, and human beings can understand it because they bear his image. It isn't a coincidence that the scientific revolution started where it did in Christian Europe. This theological framework of Christianity became the intellectual engine of the scientific revolution. It supplied the metaphysical assumptions that science requires but cannot justify on its own. Nature is orderly. Nature obeys laws. Those laws are mathematical. Human minds are capable of discovering them. Science did not arise in spite of Christianity. it rose because of it. Christian theology provided 4 essential pillars. Rationality of God. A rational creator implies a rational creation. Consistency of God. A faithful God implies stable, repeatable natural laws. Imago Dei. Humans made in God's image possess rational faculties capable of understanding creation. And demythologize nature. Nature is not divine. It is created by God. Therefore, it can be studied, measured, and experimented on. These ideas were not present in Greek polytheism, Roman paganism, Norse mythology, or Eastern cosmologies. They are uniquely Christian, and they made science possible. And look, Christianity didn't just merely inspire science abstractly. It inspired the scientists themselves, the very founders of modern physics, mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, and genetics. For example, you have Johannes Kepler, the father of celestial mechanics. He said, geometry is co-eternal with the mind of God. Kepler believed that he was thinking God's thoughts after him as he discovered the laws of planetary motion. And of course you have Isaac Newton, the father of classical physics. Newton wrote more theology than physics. His Principia begins with a theological justification for studying nature as God's orderly creation. And Blaise Pascal, the father of probability, and which led to modern computing. Pascal saw mathematics as a window in divine rationality. He invented probability theory and the first mechanical calculator, and he was a deeply religious man. We will discuss his famous wager in a few weeks, which, I will add, is a pretty decent argument for believing in God, so stay tuned. We also have Leonhard Euler, the father of modern mathematics. Euler's work in analysis, topology, and graph theory was grounded in his belief that mathematics reveals the structure of God's universe. As a side note, I guess he spent so much time crunching numbers, he didn't spend any time on picking out hats. What on earth is on his head? But I digress. Then you have James Clerk Maxwell, a pioneer in the study of electromagnetism. Maxwell unified electricity, magnetism, and light, and saw this unity as reflecting the unity of God. And of course we can't forget Gregor Mendel, the father of the study of genetics. As an Augustinian monk, Mendel founded genetics because he believed biological order reflected the divine order. Or René Descartes, the father of analytical geometry. Descartes believed human reason was trustworthy because it was given by a rational God. His mathematics became the foundation of modern physics. We have Robert Boyle, a pioneer in modern chemistry. Boyle saw nature as a mechanism crafted by God, and his Christian worldview led him to search for universal physical laws. And of course we can't forget Nicholas Copernicus, who brought us heliocentrism, the sun is the center of the solar system. A cathedral canon, Copernicus believed the universe reflected divine mathematical harmony. And we have Michael Faraday, the father of electromagnetic induction. Faraday's faith in the unity of God led him to search for unity in nature, resulting in the discovery of electromagnetic fields. And everybody knows Louis Pasteur, the father of microbiology. Look, we all still drink pasteurized milk today. Pasteur believed the order that he saw in biology was evidence of a creator, and his discoveries revolutionized medicine. Fewer might not know this guy, but they should. This is Arthur Compton, who was one of the fathers of quantum physics. He lived from 1892 to 1962, and he was an American physicist whose work reshaped modern physics and deepened the philosophical dialogue between science and faith. He discovered that X-rays scatter off electrons in a way that changes their wavelength, direct evidence that light behaves as both a wave and a particle. This experiment confirmed quantum theory and earned him the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1927. His research helped establish the photon model of light, paving the way for quantum mechanics. Later, he directed the Metallurgical Laboratory at the University of Chicago, which was a key part of the Manhattan Project, overseeing early nuclear research. Compton was a committed Christian who saw no conflict between science and belief. He argued that scientific discovery reveals the order and rationality of creation, echoing the same worldview that inspired Kepler, Newton, and others. He wrote, "Science is the description of the way God works." For Compton, the laws of physics were not random, but expressions of divine consistency. He believed that human reason itself was a reflection of the Creator's rational mind. I could go on and on here. There are a lot more examples, but there is probably no more striking example than Georges Lemaitre, the man you see on the screen, the Belgian priest and physicist who discovered the expansion of the universe, the mathematical model of cosmic origins that we now call the Big Bang. He hated that term. His term was the primeval atom. Einstein initially resisted Lemaitre's model, calling it abominable. But when the evidence became undeniable, Einstein said, "This is the most beautiful and satisfactory explanation of creation I have ever heard." Lemaitre showed that Christian theology and cutting-edge physics were not enemies, they were allies. And he believed that the universe was intelligible because it was created by an intelligent God. And his work is the ultimate example of Christianity inspiring world-changing science. The truth is this: Christianity and mathematics fit together so perfectly, it should finally put to rest forever the myth that science and Christianity are at war with one another, because nothing could be further from the truth. Christianity uniquely affirms mathematical truths that are real, not invented. The universe is structured mathematically because it reflects the mind of God. Human minds can understand mathematics because they share rationality with their creator. And this worldview explains why mathematics works, why nature is intelligible, why scientific laws exist, why human minds can discover them. Naturalism cannot explain any of that, and they cannot explain why the universe is mathematical. Christianity can. From Kepler tracing the harmonies of the heavens, to Newton revealing the architecture of motion, to Maxwell uncovering the unity of light, to Lemaitre discovering the birth of the universe, the greatest minds in science were not rebelling against Christianity, they were motivated by it. They believed the universe was written in the language of mathematics because it was authored by a rational God. Christianity did not hinder science. Christianity gave science its reason to exist. Atheism explains neither the origin nor the applicability of mathematics. Christianity explains both elegantly. Christianity does not merely accommodate mathematics, it predicts it. Mathematics is the signature of a mind that created the universe, a mind that raised Jesus from the dead, a mind that invites you to know him. And I always believe we should always follow the numbers. And the numbers lead right back to their source, God. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Next week, we'll be exploring yet another hero from our Christian past. So be sure to tune in. Until then, keep your faith warm, your cappuccino hot and frothy, and have a great week. See you next week for another Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints.